Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today I have Shante Sanchez here with me from the Bonneville County Coroner's Office. You're actually the Bonneville County Coroner.
Yes, I sure am. I've been appointed for about a year and a half now.
Okay, and you're running for re-election?
Yes, so this is actually my first term to be re-elected. The first point when I was appointed, I had to finish out the term of my predecessor, and then I now am going up for a full 4-year term.
Okay, so you're very young.
Yes.
For a coroner.
Yes.
I've known you for a very long time.
Yes, since I was in high school.
Since you were in high school, yes. So you and your mom have a coffee shop here in town. And so every time you would be off to school or something like that, your mom would tell me what you were doing. And it was always kind of cool, because my oldest son's about your age. And
I went to school with him.
Yeah. And so hearing about, I would tell her about what my kids were doing, she'd tell me what you were doing. So can you fill us in a little bit on the education that you have that kind of brought you into becoming a coroner?
Yeah, so I like to tell everybody that I'm kind of a product of my generation. I grew up, my mom, as you know, is just really a diehard documentary enthusiast. She loves murder mysteries. She always was reading those kinds of books. She loved reading and watching NCIS and Bones and all of those crime show documentaries. She was always hooked on all of them, so it was always playing in the background, and that's something that we kind of connected over. When I was going to school in high school, I kind of started to figure out what trajectory I really wanted my education to go, and I knew I wanted to be in psychology, but I didn't know exactly what avenue. I took a couple of classes in college where I would look at child development. I did a little bit of animal psychology, research, all of that, and the thing that really drew me in was always abnormal psychology. So that was always my focus, is kind of when things went awry. And so I really geared all of my extracurriculars and all of my education, all the courses that I could towards the abnormal side of things. I had the privilege of working with a couple of professors when I was going to ISU that did psych evaluations on people in and out of the criminal justice system. They were looking at things like recidivism rates, stuff like that. And I thought that's kind of the trajectory of my career was going to go, was that I was going to do psychological exams on people going in and out of the criminal justice system. So I ended up going and getting my master's in criminal justice. My emphasis was investigative criminology, but I noticed that as I was about halfway through my master's program, it was very criminal justice focused, and I didn't get enough of the psychology of it, that abnormal psych that I was really into, the understanding of the why instead of the what happens now. And so I kind of shift focus a little bit, and I went and I finished my master's. My master's ended up being in forensic psychology, so I really got that in-depth focus on the criminal mind. And then from that point, I got lost a little bit after school and COVID. I kind of just picked up whatever job I could that was kind of in my career focus. So I ended up working as like a case manager for a while. I worked with people with developmental delays, people going in and out of psych wards, and the criminal justice system needing resources, things like that. And I had to stop and take a step back and be like, this wasn't what my education was actually geared towards. This was more mental health side of things, but the burnout rate on the mental health side of things is extremely high.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be more focused on the criminal justice side of things. So I took a chance one day and I started looking into crime and criminal activity and death investigation in our state, and realized that from that point we're a coroner state, we're not a medical examiner state. In order to be a coroner, you needed a certain couple of educational points. It was really helpful if you are already a part of a coroner office, and so I reached out and I got to sit down with a local coroner, and he kind of jump-started my career down this path, and it just kind of took off from there. He opened the door and I went running through it.
Yeah, and it's, for us, we focus on veteran and first responder issues with everything that we do. And you have to limit it at some point. Veterans, there's a very clear definition, 181 days of service, you're a veteran. First responders, there's a lot of different fields, and we cover firefighters, police officers, EMTs. We expanded a little bit to cover emergency room staff and coroners. And that's really where we have to draw our line for the people that we're really going to be able to help, because you wind up diluting too much if you don't stop. But one of the reasons we started to focus on some of the coroners is after we've run people through our program, we've trained them to be divers, and this is a group of people that is uniquely suited to do search and rescue and search and recovery stuff. And so we started to interact with coroners a lot. And there is, going from one county to another in the state of Idaho is vastly different. I've seen coroners who are doctors, coroners who, one I've met that was a 911 dispatcher, some that have been cops. Is there anything that's restricting anybody at all in the state of Idaho from becoming a coroner? Or can anybody just do it?
So yeah, you're completely correct. If you go from one county to another county, it is completely different. And so one of the really, I wouldn't say a fault, but it is something that a lot of coroners are actively working on across the state, is just trying to not have distinct differences between the counties. There's 44 counties and 44 different coroner systems. And they're really trying to solidify a way that all the coroners, while we might uniquely do some things differently, we are, as a whole, trying to work towards the same objective. And so, but in order to be a coroner, it is an elected position. And so basically anybody can run for it. You just have to be 18 years old, a high school education, and just campaign from that point. So we, over the last decades of time here in Idaho, we've had all sorts of coroners, but they are usually some type of first responder in some sort of way. So they're, retired law enforcement, or they were EMTs, firefighters. They have been in that investigative side of things. They've also have handled death in some unique way. On the medical side of things, we've had doctors, EMTs, we've had emergency room, the nurses, physicians, things like that, and they are uniquely qualified in the sense that they handle things like death on a daily basis, or at least a weekly basis, and they also have the medical background in order to help them. We as a nation, though, are slowly shifting gears on what is a coroner, what is a medical examiner, and really trying to find that middle ground of, you can't just have the medical side of things, the medical cause of death. You can't just have the investigative side of things, because then you're only focused on things that aren't medical. And you need to find that common middle ground, and that's where the coroners come in. They really navigate the in-between world of the medical side, the law enforcement side, and the criminal justice side of things.
Okay, yeah, I've seen some. Now that we're in the primary season, and there are quite a few coroners that are running into primary challenges right now, and that's always good to see, because people are getting involved in politics. But as the coroners have been talking about the things that are going on, it sounds like there is an understaffing and underfunding problem with the coroners, because people think that the coroner and the medical examiner are the same thing.
Yes.
And there's definitely some confusion. And looking at the comments, I actually saw one that was shared probably yesterday that was being rather harsh on our coroner in this county, because they were investigating the cause of death, and the person didn't think that was the case. So can you tell us kind of what the coroner's job is in Idaho, how you interact with the sheriff's department, and with the medical examiner when those cases happen?
Yeah, so like I said, we ended up in this middle ground. Our coroner system actually comes from hundreds of years ago, back when we were in England and Britain, and we had a king, and the king, of course, had his second in command and his knights, and he had law enforcement in place, and then there were judges as well. And the king had found that having that authoritative presence kind of skewed the truth. And so the coroner was a position that was put in place to serve the public, making sure that they are equal to law enforcement, equal to judges, equal to that criminal side of things without being influenced, and will always have the truth for the public when it comes to death investigations. And so we kind of adopted that manner, and that's how we're different than the medical examiners. Medical examiners are medically trained doctors in pathology that go and they navigate the entire medical side of the world. So they're the ones who are doing autopsies. They're the ones who are determining a cause of death. But even then, medical examiners usually have deputies underneath them. They have investigators beneath them, and those are usually either coroners or deputy medical examiners. And they're the ones who are actively going out on scene, actively doing these investigations that help determine the manner of death. And so, I mean, a doctor can look at a body all day long and know, a gunshot wound is the cause of death. But knowing what happened to cause that gunshot wound, that is why we need the investigators. That's why we need a coroner or the deputies to actively do scene investigations. Law enforcement is their own entity. Coroners are unbiased. They navigate that middle ground, and they're just searching for the truth. And that's kind of what I always say. I don't care what the truth is. I need to know what it is.
Right.
And so I work with medical professionals. I work with law enforcement. I take in everything that they're considering, all of the things that they're weighing to determine cause of death, and then ultimately I find that middle ground. I find the truth, and I proceed from that point. So we work a lot with doctors. We work a lot with physicians to help establish things like medical history, and then we work a lot with law enforcement, and we navigate the criminal side of things. So if there were any criminal matters like illicit drugs that could have contributed to things, or if we need to start weighing whether something such as suicide is actually more of a homicide. So we look at all of those avenues, and we just kind of go and float in between, trying to just navigate to the truth. So coroners, while we aren't like medical doctors, we navigate both the medical side of things and the law enforcement side of things. So we are all investigators. What makes us unique is that, just like detectives, each detective kind of has their own specialty. We have detectives that work strictly in illicit substances, and they do that side. Ours is just death. That's all we do. We investigate death. So that's our specialty. That's the only thing that we do day in and day out. So we try to make sure that if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, and we're going to look at all of the avenues. If we still can't figure out things from that point, that's when we reach and go to a forensic pathologist, and we need a medical doctor to do a autopsy to determine that cause of death.
Okay. And so every coroner that I know of has at least a deputy or an assistant. What do you call the people that work for you?
Ours, they are deputy coroners, but I call them medical legal death investigators. So
Okay.
they're MDIs.
All right. So can you tell us real quick what their day is like? So you guys are on call because,
Yes.
of course, people die all hours of the day.
Yes.
So if someone's on call, what happens when a call comes in, and who does the call come from?
So all of my deputies, they are sworn in, just like law enforcement and the sheriff swears in all of his deputies. I swear in my deputies to serve beneath me. They are trained in medical legal death investigation. They all have their certification in it. They have all done continued education. And so we run a shift of 24/7. They usually do 2 to 3 days at a time, just because it's easy to just knock it out and then focus for the rest of the week on catching up on those investigations. Our day is we're on call. If we drop what you're doing and go as soon as that call comes in. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of dinner. Doesn't matter if you're at the store. As soon as that call is in, we like to have a response time of about 20 to 25 minutes, just because our county is large, so it does take a minute to get to that location. We receive calls from either the hospital, dispatch, or law enforcement on scene. It kind of just depends on the investigation itself. There are a few cases that fall under the coroner's jurisdiction that end up at hospitals, so we'll get notified by like the charge nurse or something that a death has happened that falls under the coroner's jurisdiction. We don't usually get too many calls from dispatch just because they don't have as much knowledge of what's happening on scene as the patrol officer or whoever responded to the scene does. So we'll usually get a direct call from them. They give us just some basic information, name if they've established identity, date of birth, location, some of the circumstances, so we know what we're walking into. And then we're there within 20-25 minutes and we start our investigation from that point.
Okay, and then so you're at a scene. The law enforcement's done their investigation. All the pictures have been taken that are required for evidence. What's the next step? Where do you take the decedent from the scene where they're found?
So it kind of depends on the situation. If, for instance, we are at the hospital and it was something that they've been at the hospital for a while, it does fall under the coroner's jurisdiction if it was something such as an accident. So drug overdoses, motor vehicle accidents, unfortunately suicides, homicides, things of that nature no matter the location, they all fall under the coroner's jurisdiction. So when we get that call, even if they've been at the hospital for a long period of time, we go out to it, we'll document everything. But the hospital has already documented all of their injuries.
Right.
And so usually we don't have to proceed and do further examination. It just kind of depends on the case. So a lot of the time we'll be able to just release them to the hospital from that point. If we're out at an unattended death, so a death that has happened out in the community that's been unwitnessed, maybe somebody did a wellness check and found their loved one passed away at home, then it kind of depends on the situation. We'll do the full scene investigation, so we'll document, we'll do an initial examination, and then we'll take them over to our facility. Bonneville County has one of the only facilities in Southeast Idaho, and so we will take them to our facility, we'll do a secondary exam, we'll do things like pulse toxicology, and then we'll store the person until we either have to establish a funeral home of choice that we can release them to, or if we have to take them to autopsy. If we gathered enough information while we were out at the unattended location that we can release them directly to the funeral home, then we will, but a lot of times they'll just come back to our facility with us.
Okay, and from a medical examiner standpoint, we have one facility in Idaho, is that correct?
Yes, so we only have one facility in the entire state. They service 35, I believe, out of the 44 counties. The other ones are too far up north that they usually go to Washington. Inside our forensic pathology center, we only have 3 forensic pathologists. So they're running 5 days a week and they're doing 5-6 autopsies a day, trying to service not only their county, which is the biggest county, but all of our surrounding counties as well.
And from your county, you share your facility, or you have an agreement with other counties to use your facility, or?
Yeah, so that's something that I've really been actively working on since I became established as the coroner in my county, is that I really want us as a whole, the whole coroner system, to really work together. And one thing that we're really lacking in this area is resources. Bonneville County is the 4th biggest county in the entire state, and we have a few more resources that our smaller counties don't. We have 140,000 people to all of our surrounding counties that have maybe 50,000. So for them not to have a facility, for them to really struggle with finding those resources to store decedent until they can go to autopsy, things like that, they struggle with. So I've been developing an MOU with all of them and trying to get us to work together as a team. And it's all going through the paperwork process now, but once it's approved, then we'll be able to really trade resources and help each other when things go wrong.
Okay. Now, I've been doing search and recovery, search and rescue since I was a teenager. So when I say this, I don't want anybody to think I'm calling them out specifically in Idaho, or this is a current thing, but in that time. So I'm in my 50s now. Since I was 14, I started doing this. I have seen all kinds of weird stuff happen with bodies picked up from a scene, whether or not it's an accident, a homicide, or whatever. I've seen them put in personal vehicles. I've seen them go into hearses. There's just so many. Sometimes you have to put them on the back of a four-wheeler because of where you're at, or a boat. But then once it's to where it can go into a vehicle, there is all sorts of variation. You're in a part of the Coroners Association, is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Coroners Association, okay. Yeah. Is the Coroners Association doing anything to try and standardize that a little bit? The way bodies are transported once they're picked up from a scene?
Yeah, I think that it also qualified, like what we talked about is there's 44 counties and there's 44 different coroner systems. Mm-hmm. The association is trying to unify us as a whole. Unfortunately, with lack of resources, a lot of the smaller counties, the counties that only have 10, 15,000 people, they don't have those kinds of resources where they even have their own transport vehicle. Mm-hmm. And of course, in my county itself, we have a transport vehicle. We call him Frank the Tank. He is capable of handling mass fatalities. He's also capable of off-roading for the most part. He is still very large, mm-hmm. But we do work very hard with our local law enforcement to make sure that if we were in a situation where we couldn't physically navigate, that chain of custody is still held. Unfortunately, a lot of the counties do struggle with those kinds of resources, so they have to rely on things like funeral homes or personal vehicles. Unfortunately, the association is really focused on trying to unify us in some other ways that those smaller issues haven't been addressed quite yet. I think the biggest issue that our association is facing is not just getting us all to agree, of course, but sure. Trying to get more funding. And trying to set standards right now because of just the lack of standardization across all of the counties has been leading to some issues. We're really trying to focus on, okay, this is the education a coroner should receive, or at least his deputies. This is, where the time frame to have this education. This is how much continued education you should focus on. Because if we can start setting those standards, we can start having it trickle down to some of those things like facilities and transport vehicles and chain of custody.
Okay. Now, when we deal with a lot of death and a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. We deal with a lot of suicides. Last 6 weeks, I've had to deal with 3 now. When it comes to why our first responders are involved in self-harm and things like that, there's quite a range. Emergency room staff sees a lot of really bad things. Mm-hmm. Firefighters, to an extent. Not as much as some cops, same thing. My youngest son's actually a deputy sheriff, and he had to do CPR his first week on the job. So that's things that a lot of people don't see. And then from a military standpoint, there's a lot of us where, there's a certain level of post-traumatic stress, but we're such a small percentage of the population as veterans and as the military, active military. And then the group that actually sees combat is so much smaller. So we're servicing these large footprints of people that have mental health issues and post-traumatic stress disorder. But as I've been working with the coroners, you guys are obviously overlooked. But when the cops, something bad happens and the cops are the ones that are dealing with the body, that's a small percentage. Firefighters a small percentage. ER staff a small percentage. You guys have to deal with almost all of it. Yeah. Are you seeing problems with servicing the mental health of coroners, not necessarily just in your office, but as a whole? Are you having mental health crises, and are you guys worried about the post-traumatic stress from what you guys see in your jobs?
Yeah, so that's actually one of my biggest concerns in my office is making sure that my staff, my crew has what they need to be able to continue the job and be successful at it. I don't want their mental health to have a play in anything. Like, I'm constantly checking in on them and making sure that they're okay, especially if they've seen or been out on a scene that was particularly hard. Especially when it comes to things like homicides, children's, infants, babies, things like that. I always do a double check with them. I also, if they need to take some time, if they need to not be on call for the rest of the day, anything like that, I really try to open that communication. The one thing that I always tell everybody is, things like law enforcement, for instance, or first responders. In general, EMTs, they'll go out and they have to do a lift assist, and they'll have to go out and they have to help somebody with COPD and, breathing treatment here, help somebody up there, maybe a transport by ambulance here. Rarely do they come out. If they do come out to a scene that is somebody that has passed away, they go, they check vitals, establish obvious signs of death, and then they're out. So they really aren't as focused into the trauma of an actual death as maybe some of the other first responders. Law enforcement's the same. Some days they're doing, patrol and they're doing just tickets, and some days they might have a drug something. Some days, law enforcement, they'll have maybe one death per couple of shifts or weeks, and even then they go in, they establish the obvious signs of death, and then they kind of back out and wait for the coroner to arrive. The coroner, it's just death. When we get a phone call, it is a death. It doesn't, the only difference is the type that we're facing. And so, it's really, it's sucky, I would say, that we aren't considered first responders in a lot of ways, and that our mental health isn't, people don't think about the mental health of somebody that just sees death day in and day out. It does take a really uniquely qualified person to be able to handle it and not have it affect the rest of your existence, not have it affect you when you go home, not have it affect your family life, your mental health, your sleep, your anything, because as soon as that phone call comes in, it's not something random. It is a death, and you have to go and deal with it.
Yeah.
And so I have made it my personal mission, at least in my office, that all of my deputies are crisis intervention trained. Some of them have worked with things like the chaplains of Idaho. They're really strong on the mental health side of things, and they're focused on their own mental health, that they know, again, with my open door and my open communication, that if they need something, like, they can just tell me, and I'll make sure that their mental health is first, because we don't want burnout. And so I know that now across the country, coroners are being recognized for the fact that we are first responders, not just last responders,
right,
and that the only thing that we see is death. And so there are some services that are slowly opening up to us. I actually have been coordinating with somebody that is a part of an organization that deals with infant loss, and she just emailed me last week and said, hey, we have actually developed a support group for first responders and deputy coroners and things like that for you guys navigating infant deaths. I've also reached out and I've started trying to coordinate with maybe one of our local hospitals, and anytime they need somebody to come in and love up on their babies, we're more than welcome to hug them and hold them and spend some time just kind of decompressing and making sure that you got to take care of yourself in order to take care of others.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I see a lot with PTSD and trauma, and people who work with it daily, like you do, like I used to have to. Now, I don't. If somebody calls me and wants me to go do a recovery or a find or a search, I can say no. If they want me to dive in bad conditions, I will, do my own personal risk assessment and say no. You are not afforded that opportunity as coroners and deputy coroners, and it's amazing seeing some people who have gone through and seen trauma after trauma after trauma, and they're fine. Doesn't bother them. They go home. They sleep sound at night. And then there's that one call that pushes them over, and it doesn't even have to be something that's particularly bad. For me, that I do have nightmares from 2008 And those are PTSD nightmares. And it's about a kid that got burned with boiling goat milk.
Yes.
It was an accident. It just happened to be where we were in a combat zone. That sticks with me. And part of it was because that kid was right about the same age as my sons that I had left at home. With the coroners and with the firefighters, I think those are the two that I see the most where there's these mental health crises where it just comes down and it strikes, and it strikes hard. If somebody does have a severe issue with a call, it sounds like you're right on top of taking care of the right things. Are there other resources that the state has, that the county has, to help our first responders when they're just overwhelmed with the trauma?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I mean, everybody does get faced with that. Like I said, our office is pretty unique in the fact that my deputies have been hand-selected to be able to handle those traumas day in and day out. But even then, I do have a deputy. She's a grandma, so anytime we get a death that happens to be of an infant under a year old, I have to check with her first. And I'm like, are you sure this is something that you want to face? And, I do that check-in with them. In regards to our county specifically, fortunately for us, we have some really good benefits, and one of them is that we do have some free counseling services. I think it's like the first two counseling sessions is free, and then from there they can kind of delegate it out. Unfortunately for my office in particular, my deputies are part-time, so they don't qualify for as many of the benefits. But that is something that our county offers, is that if you need counseling sessions, then from that point after the first, maybe you just needed somebody to talk to, but if you need more help, then they'll delegate resources out from there. A biggest issue though that we're having is that a lot of the time the coroners aren't established as first responders, so we don't qualify for those resources.
Right.
We're just kind of, we have to establish in our office that we are a team, that we work together, that we're a family, and if you need us, you can talk to us. And whether that's, displaying your discomfort about a scene that you may have gone to, some of the issues you faced, maybe some of the dynamics of the case itself. Maybe you just need to let out some dark humor for a second so that you can move on. Anything like that, where we work really good together to make sure that we support each other. But unfortunately, statewide, there are no resources. So.
Yeah, I know that Idaho is ahead of a lot of states when it comes to money and resources for families of our first responders if they die during their service. There's a lot of disability benefits now that has all happened within the last 6-7 months. HB 642, I believe it was. And so that really made a big difference. And I know that there are some of our congressional delegation that's working on pulling the coroners in and giving you guys coverage under that as well. So it's, Idaho, we're behind in a lot of things, and we are ahead in a lot of other things. Talking to a coroner in Florida and one in Oregon the last week, I brought up a couple of those things, and they really don't have what we have here, or nobody's really pushing for it. And the other thing that they're telling me is physical injuries on the job. So there's, certain things, there's not a lot of potential for you guys to get hurt. However, there are some of those calls where everything that's out there is dangerous. Yeah. I mean, we could have killed Bingham County's coroner a couple years ago on a call. The conditions were so bad, we didn't know if the vehicles were going to be able to get out. Yeah. If you guys go out and you get hurt, what would be the steps? What would be the process? Does it just go through their insurance from other things? Is there coverage from the county for injuries, on-the-job injuries for these folks?
Yeah, so that's one of my biggest things that I advocate for as well in my office, and something that I've been really actively working to not just educate the population, but really when I am really focused on upgrading things in my facility or upgrading things for my investigators. When I go forth in front of my commissioners, I have to tell them, look, the workman's comp claims on this versus just getting the equipment to begin with, it's day and night. And so that's kind of one of our biggest focuses is that, for instance, I'm only 5 foot. I'm 5 foot, I'm 110 pounds, and me being able to manhandle some of those situations is a no-go, unfortunately. Luckily for me, like if I've been in a situation, a lot of the time our law enforcement is incredible, but they do have the right to say no. They do have the right, like, to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable helping you with this situation, and they can step out. And so then I would be completely alone, you know, trying to manipulate a decedent that's unfortunately 350 pounds, and that just isn't physically a capability of mine. And so it does open up those risks of some on-scene pain and getting hurt. And so we have in my county, I have been able to coordinate with Stryker, which has the automatic cots and everything like that. So now we're able to, we have 2 of them right now, where they can navigate into a home. They can go up and down stairs, and they are push of a button instead of us having to put somebody onto a stretcher that unfortunately may be broken down or any situation like that. And then a push of the button, they can be placed up and then pushed into our transport vehicle, and it's all automatic. It's been incredible, and it has saved so many times our backs and our joints and our situations like that. But even then, I still sometimes will talk to one of my investigators, and they're like, I tweaked my back doing something, you know, and it's like, be careful. The only resources we have right now are workman's comp, and of course I'm trying to reduce that as being a potential. We've been really lucky so far. We do navigate some pretty treacherous terrain out in my county. We have some reservoirs. We have Swan Valley and all of the woods, and unfortunately, a lot of the time, people who are facing mental health crisis and they decide to maybe complete suicide, they want a scenic view, and so they go out into some areas that are pretty untouched by man. And I'm shocked by our law enforcement, our sheriff's ability to locate them. It's incredible. There have been times when I've gone out to an area and it's like, how did you even know that this was going to happen? But they've been really fortunate to really help navigate us into areas and reduce our harm and make sure that our law enforcement always puts us first too, and our protection. So that's been really great. We do have some of the best cops and firefighters in this area, and it's always nice to see that. And you know, when I'm out on something, it's usually after the search and rescue from the sheriff's department has decided that they can't expend more resources on it, because they can't spend 6 weeks looking for somebody. And so when we're out there and we make a recovery or we make a find, before we do a recovery, unless we absolutely have to move the person, like if there's a forest fire, if they're underwater, I'm pulling them out. Period. But when law enforcement comes out, they've always been really, really professional and helpful when we make those calls and reach out to them. And I've actually seen 2 occasions now where the firefighters in one case and law enforcement in the other said, hey, you know what, we're not going to put the coroner in this situation or the deputy coroner in this situation. Brought them out on, one was an ATV, one was a UTV, brought them out, got all the information collected up, and then the sheriff's deputies actually went in with one of their sleds and pulled the body out for the coroner. And I loved seeing that team effort and that teamwork. One of the other things I run into a lot is I'm surrounded by strong women all the time. And some of them are in these fields, law enforcement, EMT, firefighter, and coroner. In Idaho, do you know how many female coroners there are? You know what? I don't know the exact number. I know of 3 that I actively work with, and I think that might be it. I'm not quite sure how many there are. It is on the coroner side of things. It is definitely male dominated. Forensic side of things, though, is very female dominated.
Really?
And so that's been really interesting. Like all of our forensic technicians at our pathology center. I mean, I think it's a 2-to-1 ratio there. There are twice as many female forensic technicians and in that field than there are males. So that's been really interesting. But the coroner side, especially in this position itself, it's definitely more male dominated, and so it's unusual to face any female ones.
Yeah, I've only met one other aside from you in the state of Idaho. So, and probably nationwide another 5. There aren't a lot of female coroners. And my experience from the military when I was younger, women were not in the combat roles.
Yeah.
And as that's progressed and as that's changed, I'm seeing a lot more women brought into those roles and roles like you're in. And there is the physical difference between men and women. I'm quite a bit taller than you. So, aside from some of those physical differences in some cases, and there's small men too. I mean, there certainly are. As women in this field, as women coroners, are there any challenges that you're facing that maybe the men are not?
I think that a lot of it, honestly, I don't think I face as many issues on the female side of things as the fact that I'm young. So people see me, and I am very young for my age, or for being a coroner and being as far into this position as I am. So I know that there is a little bit of a perception that maybe I'm naive and I don't have as much experience in the field as maybe some colleagues or peers of mine. And so I do get a lot of that, of questioning whether or not I have what it takes. On the female side of things, I am very fortunate, like I said, that the first responders that I work with, the people that I surround myself with all the time, I get a lot of, they understand my limitations just by being small, not so much as being female, but there have been multiple situations where, for instance, my chief deputy, so my second in command, he is older than me, and he is 6 foot something, and he's, he projects what you think a coroner would be. And so if we go out on scene together, there have been times when he gets addressed first, and he's like, nope, down here. And he's like, that's the coroner. And I'm like, yeah, it's me. But overall, people realize that, of course, like I said, I am small as a woman, and so they're more than happy to help. But it's never been what is she doing on here? She can't do it. It's more like, do you need some help? Because I'm watching you struggle, and this isn't a funny situation, so let me just help you, kind of thing. And so I've been really grateful, and it's been really fortunate that I've done that. But like I said, I think one of the biggest things that I face on my own personal side is just how young I am. By being young and then being a female on top of that, there's a couple of perceptions that often I have to face. But once they start talking to me, once they realize that I do have the education that's needed, I do have the experience, I know what I'm doing and the reasons why I'm doing it, and I can defend all of those actions, then they're more open and willing to work with me.
Sure. Well, and you also look very young for your age. I know how old you are, and you look young for your age. So, there's always a potential for running into that the ageism thing, and I see it with some of the older people that are in the first responder world too. There's limitations. It's like me. I could probably lift as much as you right now because I got a bad back, just had shoulder surgery, but that doesn't project itself outwardly. Yeah. And I think I see that a lot with women in these fields. You're exactly right. It's ageism or kind of more subversive sexism, where it's they don't want women in some of these roles because, well, say there's a fire and you have to be dragged out of a building. Yeah. You're not dragging me out of a building. However, at this point, I couldn't, even though I look like I probably could. So those roles move back and forth, and there certainly is some collision there with men and women on those sorts of things. So What do you think, to serve us as a community, what can we do better to help our coroners not only do their job well, but also to be safe and to have the mental health support that you folks need after all the horror that you see and all?
I think a lot of it is just education. I think that we just had this huge perception for the last, 30, 40 years of what a coroner is, and we're just body snatchers. We just come in, say, yep, they're dead, and then out we go. Or, all of this change in how the media portrays coroners and medical examiners, that we can, get blood results back within a day, or we're able to just kind of look at somebody and be like, yes, they died at this exact time. This is what they died of. I can tell because of this, and this test came back. And that's unfortunately just not where we're at in our field. Our advancements in forensics over the last 20 years are astronomical. Just like our advancements in technology, our advancements in building structures, our advancements in anything that we have done over the last 20 years has just continued to skyrocket, and so is forensics. But we still aren't at the point where I can just go back to my office, go like this, and then all of a sudden I have test results. And so I think a lot of it is just understanding, how much we have grown over the last couple of decades, and how much education that we are really trying to focus on in the forensic field in death investigation, and realizing that the amount of cold cases has significantly reduced. The amount of things like mass murderers, serial killers, things like that has significantly reduced over the last couple of decades, and it's because of these advancements that we are able to do, but we're still not quite at that level of media portrayal. And so we do need people to realize that as much as we are trying to educate what our role is, how we're doing it, we really try to be transparent. We really try to be open with the families, give them an accurate time frame on looking at things. It still takes time, but as long as the coroner itself is really open and in the communication, the family doesn't need answers. They just need to know what's going on.
Right.
And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. A lot of maybe coroners, even law enforcement doesn't realize. We get into this idea, especially on the mental health side of things, and on the mental health side of people like loved ones, that if we don't have answers, then we start to slowly want to withdraw. We don't want to answer that phone call to tell them again we still have no answers. But the truth is, they just want to be in the loop.
Yeah.
And so if we can just open that communication as a whole across the community about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to help them, what resources are available for us, and just educate as a whole, I think that's going to just start making a mass difference.
Oh, absolutely. I bring this up a lot on these things. Movies and TV are our worst enemy when it comes to any of this stuff. Yeah. We can't do stuff like it's portrayed. So from a veteran standpoint, we all have Saving Private Ryan is probably one of the better.
Yeah.
And then The Hurt Locker, oh my gosh, that is mind-numbingly stupid.
Yeah.
Is there anything from with your mom watching the crime shows, are there any that coroners are going to look at and say, oh man, that's terrible, or...
So I think my biggest one is I love Bones. I absolutely love Bones. I think as a forensic anthropologist, it was so well done. But she worked at the Smithsonian. She had all of this technology. Like I said, you go in and the little tech computer girl had her computer and she was drawing people and making them look like their bones. This one episode, I watched... The Bones, the lady, she took cremains and just spread out all of the ashes on a table and found just the tiniest little bone fragment. And the whole investigation was based off of that. And unfortunately, it would be incredible. It'd be absolutely incredible to be able to do that, but it's just not feasible, and not in this time and age, and probably not in my lifetime. But as much as I really, that one frustrates me the most, I think, is just the technology that they have and things like that. I think what's more accurate, and hindsight is 20/20, when you watch these crime show documentaries and you see these things about cold cases being solved, when you're watching it, of course you're like, why didn't nobody see that? Why didn't anybody do that? But they have to realize, it's been 20 years and all of this evidence has now been gathered. In the moment, it's not that easy. It's not just, it's taken years of gathering all of this information. It's taken years of people slipping up during their interviews to finally really catch those little things. And so I think that's the biggest frustration, is that we look at this media, we look at how they conduct themselves without realizing that those documentaries, those cold cases that got solved, that should have been solved the first 2 weeks in their minds. Hindsight is 2020. It's been years and years of collecting all that evidence and putting it into an hour-and-a-half show. Makes it look really straightforward and cut dry, but that's just not how it is. And there are so many times when I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm just laying there running through cases in my head, making sure that I did everything right, that I can make sure I had all of the information available, because if down the line I get questioned, I want to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row.
Yeah. And so what is, aside from just the death part of it, what's and the misconceptions of people, is there anything that can be done better between law enforcement and coroners, firefighters and coroners, and to work some of these, how shall I put this, some of the misconceptions and help get that information out there? I've seen public forums where cops and firefighters are talking. I've seen after action reviews and things like that where families are brought in, other departments are brought in, but not everybody does stuff like that. From your department and from what you do, are you after a death or after a recovery or something like that, do you do a formal process where you're talking about what went right, what went wrong, and working through the issue?
So yeah, collaboration is key, especially in this field, between all first responders, between law enforcement, between fire and EMTs, and then between us. I think that is just the collaboration that is needed, especially when things do end up being a little askew, and being able to have that knowing when you're talking to somebody, that having that professional relationship with them as well, and knowing that even if you have disagreements, that we're all objectively trying to reach the end result and not taking anything personally is really key. I'm very fortunate in my county that I don't face a lot of obstacles between the other first responders and the things that I'm doing. I think a lot of it is that they're happy about the growth of the coroner's office and how active we are. There were times, unfortunately, over the last few decades that the coroner wasn't able to fulfill the needs of law enforcement as they had wanted. And for me to be very gung-ho about how I do something and really step into the role fully, they have been very welcoming of that. And so I'm very fortunate. I haven't had a lot of resistance from my first responders about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And if they do, they have been very understanding and very professional about when I explain, okay, well, this is why, because I'm holding these standards. I am trained to do this. This is how it should be done, so that way we're not questioned by prosecution or anything like that down the road. Then they're a lot more willing. But right now, most of it is like law enforcement, like I said, is grateful. Law enforcement doesn't want to get nitty and gritty into the ooey and the gooey. They really don't. They do a lot of stuff, but that's kind of crossing some of their personal lines. And so having somebody like a coroner that's willing to really get down and dirty, it's a relief a lot of the time. If we face a case that is a little more high profile, then I will sit down with either the chief of police or the sheriff, and we'll talk about things. The biggest thing, like I said, is just opening that collaboration and that communication. And if something happens, address it pretty much right away. We don't wait until down the line and just be like, well, this one time you did that. And it's like, well, is this going to be our new norm? Is this our new standard? Is this how we're going to respond to it? What should we do moving forward? In cases such as like police officer involved shootings, there is a public forum where we all kind of go and we collaborate, and we look over everything from the body cams and how the investigation was handled, and if we want to do things differently. But overall, my first responders have been really welcoming of the change.
Okay. Now, well, I got probably one more question here.
Okay.
So 10 years from now, you're still in the same job. What if you could have 3 things, technology, whatever it is, what would your top 3 things be that you would want to be able to get or to have, or changes to be made for the coroner's office?
Ooh, I would love, my number one is I would love a forensic pathology center here in Idaho. The fact that we only have one for the entire state, it's not doing the people justice. There are so many families out there that are really struggling with getting their closure in a timely manner, and it is not on anything on that particular forensic pathology center. Ada County is doing so amazingly. They are dual accredited. They are a strong team. They are a force to be reckoned with, but they're only capable, a person can only do so much. Mm-hmm. And they're trying so hard to service our entire state. And our state is huge, especially as Southeast Idaho itself, the influx of people and the growth that we're just facing. And then on top of that, all of the coroner's offices and our advancements to adhering to those standards, we're going to get to a point where the pathology center isn't going to be able to handle our additional caseload. And so having a forensic pathology center here is vital. That is my number one. And we don't have to have all the bells and the whistles. We don't have to build, $1 million facility right out of the gate and have all of the fancy everything on it. If you ever get the chance to go to Ada County and to see and tour their forensic pathology center, the coroner's office, it is incredible. It is state of the art. Everything is beautiful. It's brand new. It's been built. It was built last year, finalized. Everything's still shiny. Everything's still, their budget for their window washing is probably bigger than my entire budget as a whole. And so I definitely don't need all of the bells and whistles of that, but having the capabilities of being able to bring pathology services into this area so that all the coroners on this side of the state don't have to travel for 5-6 hours and back. My investigators wake up at 2 a.m., pick up a decedent, drive them 4 hours to Ada County, attend the autopsy, and then take them all the way back into our county. So it's a 15-hour day. So if we can kind of alleviate some of that and have something that is in our area that can service this side of the state, I know that everybody across the entire state, even Ada County, they're not going to be upset by us helping relieve that workload on them. The other thing that I would really like is that our investigative gear get up to date. Technology is continuously advancing. Being able to have things like, now we have rapid toxicology, having that have a little more tweaks and some of the quirks worked out, so that way we could use that rapid toxicology to kind of continue our investigations. Things like that would be great. Even if we can't have a forensic pathology center in our area, for my facility to have something like a CT scan or an X-ray machine can reduce the amount of those decisions of weighing whether or not we have to take them across the state to have an X-ray, or if we could just have it conducted here. It also save, ultimately in the long run, it would save a lot of our counties some resources, being able to have some of that here in our area. And then ultimately just funding for our deputies. Our deputies are, like I said, they're equivalent to a detective, and I feel like law enforcement does get a lot of funding from the state. They get a lot of retention and recruitment funding, and that's because they have a very high turnover rate, and I think the last I heard, ISP has like 40 open positions or something.
Oh, wow.
And so they're getting a lot of funding from the state for things like recruitment and retention of their officers. But having that trickle down to other first responders, our coroner's office, I mean, my county itself is 4th in the entire state, and we only have 2 full-time deputies, and then we have 2 part-time, and it's unfortunately just not enough. So if we can get funding and at least have 4 full-time deputies, that would really make the process just speed roll.
All right. Well, that sounds great. I mean, I definitely think the coroners do an amazing job. I don't envy you in your task at all. And I'm glad that there's people that'll do it. And, a quick comment on veterans and first responders. I've seen the respect and the dignity provided to our veterans and first responders by coroners. A lot of times when there's contracts from like the funeral homes to transport a body, I know a lot of the coroners, if they're dealing with a veteran or first responders, will make sure that person is transported by the coroners and not sub that out. And that's something I think all of us appreciate from a veteran first responder standpoint. But all right, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much, Shante. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I know that one thing that I really try to focus on is the mental health side of things. For instance, I have been able to speak with like suicide prevention teams, and one of the things that I have done for our veterans is we have suicide packets that we give to the families of people that have completed suicide, and we have specific ones now that have veterans resources in them, so that way we can make sure that we are gearing some of that extra support towards those families that need it. And so I'm really grateful at this opportunity to be able to kind of speak to you about some of the issues that we've faced.
All right. Well, if you'd like to come out and sit down and discuss veteran and first responder issues, or if you would like to do a debate, if you want to get your primary opponent, if he would like to come out, I'd love to set you guys up in a forum like this. And so instead of a confrontational debate scenario, it would be more of a sit down, relax. So for any candidate, not just for the coroners, any candidate out there, if you want to do something like that, reach out to admin at heroesdivingforthesea.org, and Aubrey will get you set up with a time and a location, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Thank you.
Thank you.